Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Love and Dementia Navigating Relationships Through the Care Journey panel. That was a mouthful. Wow. I just want to welcome everyone to the panel. Thank you for being here. Thank you to my guests who I'll meet in a second. So for me, this panel hits me differently with my own journey as a caretaker, and I'm not talking about what my character did on This Is Us, but with my own mother, who is currently in a very sharp decline with Alzheimer's, something that she was diagnosed with while I was on This Is Us dealing with it, my character's wife's diagnosis. And I find it interesting on how my own journey is affecting my relationship with my siblings, who, now that my mom is being diagnosed with this awful disease, would actually, I never would have imagined it would bring us closer. But I didn't grow up with my siblings. We were never close. We spoke rarely and definitely didn't come together on anything until it was about our mother's care. My sister is the up close and personal caregiver, and emotionally, I've never been there, for my mom until now, and in dealing with this, because we just didn't have that kind of relationship. So for me, as terrible as dementia and neurodegenerative diseases can be, what I've tried to do is find a positive in what's happening, so that mentally I can deal with the horrible side of it. My mom definitely doesn't realize it, but she has, in her decline, actually tightened the bond between myself and my siblings, who together we have essentially lived segmented lives. So I'm curious to know from each of you, my panelists, if you've had a similar realization, or have you been impacted in a similar way at all? So why don't we first do introductions? And when I introduce you, then you can each tell us a bit about yourselves, and then we'll get to some questions, and we'll go from there. So first on the panel, and so far we still are missing one panelist, guys, so we apologize for that. We're trying to find Rusharon. But first I'd like to introduce Sandra Abravaya. If you want to say something about yourself, Sandra, and tell us if what I said impacted you in the same way.
Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing that. These things do impact the entire family unit in a number of ways. It's really great to hear that it brought you and your siblings closer. I've seen it go both ways. I am living with my husband's diagnosis of ALS, another neurodegenerative disease. We were 37 when we were diagnosed. It was actually the day we came home from the hospital with our second daughter, and a neurologist told my husband, who just had weakness in his left hand, that he might have 6 months left to live. So we've had quite a journey. He has remarkably outlived that prognosis. He is alive 6.5 years later. He's almost totally paralyzed. He has trouble speaking, and he is mentally operating better than I am, but he's trapped in his body.
Right.
And it is a currently terminal illness. So I think I would say in our family, me and my husband have become closer, and me and my parents have certainly become closer physically. I did a sophisticated real estate search, and I bought the closest house on the real estate market to them. So I live across the street now.
Wow.
Very smart.
Very smart.
I found it interesting that you said, and I don't hear a lot of people say this, but you said when we got diagnosed, and a lot of people don't, understand that when one, especially, with spouses, when someone gets diagnosed, it is something that is inherently shared, that both people are going to now be sharing this experience of care. Also on the panel, we have Emma Hemming-Willis. If you would tell us a little bit about yourself, and speak to how maybe the diagnosis has brought you closer to people in and outside of your family.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. I'm happy to be here. My name's Emma, and my husband, Bruce, was diagnosed with frontotemporal dementia It's been about a year, I want to say, since we got that diagnosis. I would say that, we've always had a close-knit family. I would say that this has definitely brought that whole circle even closer together. Like Sandra said, it can go both ways, and I feel very lucky and blessed to see sort of this unit that I have with our family. This bond is really even closer. We're really so much more rooted, I think, together, especially sharing this. Really, I don't want to say that it's a unique experience. This feels very unique to me. This is the first time that I've ever, this is my first dementia encounter,
Right.
so I'm kind of learning as I go, and so is our family. But I am grateful that we are all speaking the same language over here.
Great. Next, we have author Amy Bloom. If you want to introduce yourself, tell us a little bit about why you're here and if you were affected, if anything surprised you, maybe with how you dealt with your husband's care.
That's an interesting place to start. I'm an old lady, so not that much surprises me, but there are always possibilities when you're dealing with human beings. I actually started out, before I was a novelist, as a clinical social worker, and still am. I mean, I've been in practice for 40 years, and my husband Brian was diagnosed with early onset Alzheimer's when he was in his mid-60s, and as everybody on the panel knows, people are usually symptomatic for a number of years before somebody finally gets a diagnosis. And sometimes the symptoms tend to sort of lead you to a tipping point. So there are things that people notice and things that we disregard and things that we have hopes will go away. And then at some point, there's the tipping point and one gets the diagnosis. But if you have a helpful neurologist, they will usually say to you, your spouse, your parent, God forbid, your child has probably had this illness for several years at least. And that was certainly the case with my husband. And then having never written a memoir and having absolutely no wish to ever write a memoir again, Brian made the decision when he got his Alzheimer's diagnosis, having seen Alzheimer's close up in our extended family, that as he said to me, I am not here for the long goodbye. I would rather die on my feet than live on my knees. And so he made the decision, which I came to support, to arrange for medical assistance in dying, which if you have dementia, you cannot get in the United States. And so we made the journey to Switzerland and did that. And I will say I was very blessed in my immediate family and also Brian's family, especially his mother, who was a devout Catholic, and came to be very supportive. We could not have done it without her emotional support. But also, more than 5 people, you have more than 5 opinions. And, we certainly heard from people in ways that they intended to be helpful, which might be something we could talk about on a panel, how people try and what they miss and what we might encourage them to offer that may not have occurred to them. I did once do almost an entire talk on the subject of why you don't need to say a text that says, let me know if there's anything I can do. And that's
Right.
how I come to be here.
Thank you for sharing all of that. Rushern, we found you. You made it.
I made it.
So
Yeah.
glad you're here.
Me too.
Technology is not my friend.
Yeah. Everyone, this is Sharon Baker III. Please introduce yourself or tell us a little bit more about yourself.
Okay,
And maybe one of the things I said is that with my mother's diagnosis, the surprising thing for me is it brought me and my two siblings closer together. And so we were all kind of sharing like what kind of surprise you took from your care journey, or what changes did you see?
Yeah, mine. And I heard some of the testimony, which was really fascinating and good. And I want to thank everybody for doing this. My wife was a lawyer like I am, and we noticed when she was about 48 years old that she was forgetting things. At the time, I think our youngest daughter was 15, maybe 14. And so it never occurred to us that she would have a diagnosis 2 years later at age 50 of early onset dementia. As may have not been said, I was an elected official and I was just beginning my term as county executive. Some of you have mayors. And so for the family, it really went in a couple of stages. It was really hard for me, and I say this all the time, to talk to my daughters. One was 15, the other was 18, to tell them what their mom was diagnosed with, because we knew there was no cure. My son and I, who was older, had conversations. And eventually I had to tell them because she was showing signs. So as a family, to get through that journey, it was about 14 years before she passed. It really had good moments and it had bad moments. At times, and I say this to people, especially now, the thing that I miss, because it was hard for me to talk to the girls, was getting help in a way that I think men often don't do. And so the repercussions of that is that we're in therapy now, to bring back not just how to grieve for my wife, who's been dead now about 2 years. Her third anniversary of her birthday is coming up in March. But the struggle we went through as a family, as a young family, and especially for the 15-year-old who was the only one at home. It was the three of us trying to care for my wife. Never left the home. We kept her with us through the whole journey. So it's very hard.
Thank you for sharing that. My next question, I think, is for Emma. So after dealing with my own mom's diagnosis, which actually happened concurrently with my wife's mom, they both went into assisted living in the same month. It was very hard to have both my mother-in-law and my mom diagnosed with dementia at the same time, because now we have to kind of split our energy, if you will, instead of coming together for either my mom or her mom. But my perspective on my own aging and care, and how I might handle that in the future, has come to the forefront of a lot of my daily thought processes. And so Emma, I wonder, how has your experience influenced your own perspective on aging and health, and what kind of strategies are you using to create a sense of balance and fulfillment in your life and your family's life?
Listen, my go-to is to put everyone's needs above my own, right? I feel like there was a time when I was really on the bottom of that list. Scheduling appointments, if it's for, my kids, my mother, my husband, there's so many responsibilities that I have. And I'm an absolute perfectionist, always trying to just strive and do my best. And that really harmed me over time. I have to make a conscious effort every day to just remind myself that it's okay if I need to put my needs above everyone else's. It's almost necessary. I think my wake-up call was listening to a doctor talk to me when he was seeing me kind of, in my sort of robot, like doing all the things. And he said to me, Emma, I don't want to see you a statistic. He says, I have seen caregivers run themselves into the ground. He has seen he said, I've been on cases where the caregiver passes before the patient. And that really struck me. So after learning that, after hearing that, and seeing sort of at this pace that I was going in, I really make a conscious effort to make sure that when I'm putting someone else's appointments in, that I'm checking into making sure that I'm, have my doctor's appointments. When I go in to see my doctor, I am scheduling right then and there, 6 months later, a year out, whatever it is, if it's a mammogram, if it's a dentist appointment, I do it right there and then, because I know that if I say, oh, I'll call you and make that, appointment, I just don't. So I schedule, making time for myself. I think that's really important. And I just want to say it's not selfish. If you look after yourself, it is absolutely vital, because if you are not caring for yourself, you cannot care for the people that need it.
So it's the opposite of selfish if you actually take care of yourself, your own mental health, your own physical health, because you have to be healthy mentally and physically in order to care for someone else who's depending on you sometimes 100% of the time.
That's
is
right.
what you're saying.
Yeah.
That's great. Thank you for that. Sandra, decision making in a family unit can be crazy when it comes to anything from groceries to even like vacations and things like that. For me, it's been a huge learning experience on how to make decisions with my family members, stuff we never did before when it comes to my mom's care. How do you and Brian approach decision making and care planning, and what role does, say, open communication and shared decision making play in the caregiving journey for you guys?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's so many areas where you are in decision-making mode as a couple with young kids, right? So when Brian got this diagnosis, we had a newborn baby and a 2-year-old. And so I think the part of decision-making that Brian relinquished relatively quickly was like the decision-making of being a parent, right? Like all the work that you have to do to actively parent your kids just like was not going to be feasible if he had to like look after himself and just stay alive as long as possible. Like that was the priority. So sometimes he gets frustrated that I just make all the decisions. And it is what it has to be. But in terms of his care, we've stayed in sync along the way, every step of the way. We have a really open line of communication. But I want to be honest, we fight a lot. Like, I mean, this is not easy. Man, we have couples therapy. I have therapy. I got Brian to do therapy. I mean, this is the pits. Like, talk about like just navigate marriage when your husband's like limb by limb is falling apart and he's been told he's got a couple of years to live. So like, it's hell and it sucks.
Right.
And, I think we just stay super honest with each other. And I'm really honest with him about how much I hate caregiving. I tell him that all the time. And I think
I
that's
love
okay.
that.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah. I tell him, I love you, but this is hell. And if he can't see that, then he can't see me. And if he can't see me, then I'm so alone. If my partner can't see me and my own suffering, then I'm totally alone and I can't be there for anybody.
That's right.
That's true.
Can I
Go
jump
ahead. Yeah,
one
please,
second?
Amy, please do.
I think that's so important when you said if you can't be seen, because your situation with ALS is somewhat different than somebody going through the rapid decline of dementia. And one of the things that I think that people, caregivers, whether it's a spouse or a parent, don't get to say is how lonely it is,
Yes.
that they are not seen. and you are not seen, unlike in your situation, you are not seen by somebody who is choosing not to see you. They cannot see you because they are in a small boat going off the shore into an ocean that you will not be able to navigate with them, no matter how much you care for them. And we can see it as caregivers. We see them in the little boat. We see them going off the shore. We see them getting further and further away. But the other piece is that whether you are a child or a spouse, they are leaving you. And that is so painful. And I think it's one of the things that caregivers don't get to say. You know, you can talk about, well, we have this connection, that connection, and all of that is true. I mean, there is nothing like caregiving to make you aware of the fact that more than one thing can be true at a time. I mean, if you didn't know it before, when you are caregiving, you absolutely know that more than one thing can be true at a time, including like, this absolutely sucks, please don't leave me. Right? More than one thing is always true, but I just think that there's not a lot of room sometimes for people to be able to talk about. There is a tremendous bond, but there is also constant and rolling loss.
Right.
Just think that it's
Yeah.
important for people to be able to acknowledge that the grief is constant, at least in my experience.
Well, to speak to that, earlier I mentioned how finding the tiniest bit of positivity while caring for my mom has helped me and my siblings deal with my mom's care. Your husband Brian took an unconventional approach to his diagnosis and one that focused on positive and proactive end-of-life experience. As his partner, and listening to what he wanted, and following that path of his choice, like how was that conversation? Whose idea? Is it an idea he came to you with? And how did that conversation go when he told you this is how I want it?
It was more than one conversation. I should say about Brian that he played varsity football. That he had 3 principles in life. The first of which was definitely say yes take yes for an answer. Better to ask forgiveness than permission, which will indicate to you that he was raised Catholic. And finally, if there's going to be a fight, try to keep it from happening. If it's going to happen, throw the first punch. And I think that's absolutely how he felt about the Alzheimer's diagnosis. He said to me, basically 24 hours after we got the diagnosis, and it was the usual kind of diagnosis that you often get with Alzheimer's, which was mild cognitive impairment, which I consider to be one of the most brutal euphemisms I have ever heard, because a neurologist will use mild cognitive impairment to mean the person can still dress themselves. They do not mean you are going about your business. They mean that they can still function independently at a minimal level, which is sort of not what you expect when you hear mild. You think, oh, we got yards, we got miles to go.
Right.
It's not always true. And so he thought about it and we got the diagnosis. I wept. He sat there, his solid self, with his game face on. And then after about a day and a half, he said, I mean, we both knew his aunt, to whom he was very close, had dementia, although not early onset. And it had just been brutal for the entire family. And, that terrible rolling downhill where you have what seems like 30 minutes of a plateau, and then everybody dives off the plateau into the next more difficult area of functioning. And he said, he's a very strong-minded guy. I mean, at one point he said to me, I think you should research this. I think there must be a way that you can get hold of some kind of medication and you put it in the blender and you give it to me and the kids sit around, and it's going to be beautiful. And you do that. And I said, honey, I will go to jail. And he had a long pause and he said, you'll be great in jail. He said, you are so resourceful and such a leader. I think it'll work out for you. I was like, I don't think this is a plan. He said, well, go research it a little bit more. But he said, I am not here for the long goodbye. He said, you know what? He said, he's a very funny guy. He said, I am sufficiently vain and sufficiently shallow that I want people to miss me when I'm gone. I don't want them to be relieved.
Mm,
And we
that's
had a lot of,
powerful.
it was, and we had a lot of back and forth. And one of the things that became really clear, actually, after doing a ton of researching, I am the child of 2 journalists, so a lot of researching, and is that, as he said correctly, I see that with Alzheimer's, if you do not choose to leave early, you cannot leave. And it's 100% true. It's like, this is a decision that people make in a fairly early stage of the illness. And one of the things I would say for all kinds of families, these are discussions that people should be having as early as possible. I mean, pre-diagnosis, if you can bring yourself to, but as early as possible, just about how one sees life, how one sees death, and always hard. I mean, I remember having to chase my own parents around just to get them to sign, a living will, chasing them around a small house. And, every time I turned around, somebody had walked into the backyard. And so you have to really push yourselves while the person with the dementia is capable of it to say, let us talk about life and death. And I
So
think that's
important.
really hard for people.
It's hard, but I think very important. Because my wife's mom and my mom were both diagnosed at the same time, basically, and both had to go into care. We talk about it now all the time because we know we're gonna, age together, and we don't have kids, so we will be relying on ourselves and however we set ourselves up. So we talk about it at this point all of the time. That's one of the things we would never have talked about until we
Yes.
experienced being caregivers. Rushern, I wanted to, ask you. Again, I'm going to say my siblings and I were not close. I didn't grow up with them. I didn't even grow up with my mom. I grew up with grandparents, and so the closeness that has happened between my siblings and even my mom, where now, my brother and sister and I talk once every 3 to 6 months. Now we speak a few times a week. Your children were still young when your wife's sister was diagnosed, and your daughters were still in high school.
Yes.
How much did the family dynamic change after her diagnosis? And you touched on it earlier, and you said that one of your daughters was there all of the time. And so how did the family dynamic change? When it came to her education, how did you guys accomplish that? I'm really curious to know.
It was really, it changed dramatically because in our family, my wife was the one who ran the show. So when she was diagnosed, I didn't even know what our bank account was. I mean, I didn't really do anything. She really was running it. And she had been there for plotting our children's education. And so the youngest one, which she really had planned to spend a lot of time with her, at that very critical moment when she had just turned, she was 14. So, that time between 13 to 16, I always tell people, girls go away and you just hope they
Right.
come back at 18. For her, it was the whole house change. It went from an immaculate house being run by somebody who was very efficient to the two of us, a 14-year-old and a 50-year-old, trying to navigate it. At the same time, I was starting a new job that was very demanding in a very demanding place. And so what it did do was make my daughters and my son, who's about 8 years older than our youngest daughter, it made them much closer as a unit. They had always been, the girls were together and my son was apart, but this brought them back. And they needed to come back because the youngest was there. So she was there for the mild cognizant part of it, where their mother went from this very dynamic civil rights lawyer to a really nice, sweet lady, which was different than what the others had grown up with. to having to fix dinner for her mother, having to not stay after school for a program so that we could switch and she could watch mom while I went to a meeting. And so it definitely changed her lives, and it changed the others. My middle child came home from college and stayed a semester at home and drove to college so she could be around it. But you know, it's something we don't talk about, you know, is the impact it has on the family dynamics, but also as a spouse.
Oh, yeah.
Because my relationship with my wife grew much closer because I was the one that she communicated the most with, and I understood her. I'd known her since she was 18. So, but it meant that, you know, it was hard to focus on three other people at the same time caring. And so that had a way of coming into dynamic. But the children as a unit, and they still are today, they're very close. You know, they talk a lot, and I think that brought them together. And when they come to me about decisions, whether when my wife was alive, my late wife was alive, or afterwards, they come as a group. So it's usually, you know, me and talking to them about what they're going to do. So in that respect, it has brought them closer. And I'll say this finally, it made them more aware of how life can change.
Mhm.
You know, she was 48 years old. You couldn't have said that this extremely bright, talented person was going to be at a point where she couldn't, you know, speak for 10 years. So it made them aware of how life is and how fortunate we are to have the resources we have, which is what made them active in the Alzheimer's Association and dementia care.
Yeah, and what you said, the last thing you said, that leads me to my next question. This is for everyone, really, because it's something that it's been really tough for me and my family to deal with. Is you talked about support and navigating the healthcare system. You know, we have these responsibilities to be caregivers for our family member who is being diagnosed with this neurodegenerative disease, and you know, the services that we have access to. How did you guys navigate that? And you know, I want to talk about not just, you know, how hard it is to find resources, to find help, but also how it can affect a family financially as well, and what challenges you guys may have faced or and then overcame or not. Sandra, why don't we start with you? Sandra, I'm sorry, I know that's the right way to pronounce it.
Okay. Yeah, no, it was felt like a big caregiver burden to be the coordinator and navigator for the care, which I know is sort of shared across all of these illnesses. And I think Hilarity for Charity is like just a beacon of light, obviously, in that regard, and the way they're supporting caregivers, because just like we're all talking about, if the caregiver isn't supported, nobody else can be supported. And I ended up spending my own professional time founding a healthcare company with neurologists and nurses and psychiatrists and psychologists that can see families with Alzheimer's in all 50 states, and partners with Hilarity for Charity, because I wanted to create a version of care that was different from the one I had to deal with. And I wanted it to be really caregiver centric. So that's sort of how I've channeled my frustrations with the system, by just taking it on.
Right. And for you, Emma, you know, it's the same question, but you know, for me, like I had no idea where to start when it came to approaching my mom's care. And so it just seemed so overwhelming to start. Was there any, was there a Hilarity for Charity or Alzheimer's Association or something that you really thought that really guided you down the path to the best way that you could provide care for your husband?
I mean, in the beginning, you know, I remember leaving that appointment with my husband with a diagnosis that I couldn't even pronounce. I didn't know what it was. I'd heard of it before. Sorry, I've got my tissues here because I can feel it coming. I feel it coming. You know, and like a pamphlet.
Right.
So I felt like there really wasn't enough information for me at that appointment. And it was kind of just like walking out of, I just felt like the rug had been ripped from underneath me. And I then had to do a deep dive into Google. It's a dark place. It's a dark place to look up FTD. But that's what I had to do. And at that time, you know, it was really hard for me to try and connect with other people because I also didn't want to say what my husband had. You know, it was different circumstances, I guess. I mean, I think for some, they want to keep it quiet. I needed to keep it quiet for other reasons, just to protect him and his privacy. So I wasn't able to reach out for support. I wasn't able to come to Hilarity for Charity. There was a lot of things that I wasn't able to do because I was so scared, you know? Sorry, I'm a crier. But what I will say is that, you know, now that we've been able to share our story, you know, I've been able to tap into this community and, you know, if it's Hilarity for Charity, if it's other organizations, if it's, you know, I'm able to connect with other caregivers. And what's been so meaningful for me is connecting with care partners who have been through the journey and they can share what they've learned sort of like in hindsight, you know, so it kind of helps me navigate this because I'm in it, right? Like we're in it.
Yeah.
So, you know, now I'm able to lean in and, you know, raise my voice and speak, and to be able to receive the support that I'm receiving, our family is receiving, has really been incredible. So, you know, I would say, you know, when you're at your neurology office, try and find that social worker, you know, ask questions, get support. It's Hilarity for Charity, you know, find groups that you can get into. It's very important to lean in on your community because they have so much to offer.
Yeah,
And vote. Can I just throw that in? And vote.
absolutely.
We are Americans. We believe in the individual. We believe in the small unit. We believe in charities and connecting, all of which I think is terrific. But I would also say almost as important as therapy, which a couple of people have brought up, and I think that that is really crucial for people. We need to vote.
Yes.
Want to make sure that the person that you are supporting at whatever level of politics is somebody who believes in, for example, making healthcare accessible to people who do not have means.
Right.
Who believes that, you know, caregivers for dementia, 2/3 of whom are women, should have some national support, that there should be some understanding that this is a crisis, and it is not just a crisis in my living room or Emma's living room, it's a national crisis. You want to have people who are looking to support the quality of life for both the people with an illness and their caregivers. And I just want to say, I feel like if there's any shortcoming I ever see from all of these extraordinary organizations to which we are all so grateful, it's that at the bottom, it doesn't say vote.
Right.
This is not just an individual problem. This is a systemic problem. You can make a difference.
I agree.
Absolutely. There's
I
so
agree.
much that I feel like now, and now that, you know, I'm dealing with a parent who's been diagnosed and a mother-in-law as well. How many people that I've connected with that I already knew that
Mhm.
are going through the same thing, being suddenly thrown into the caregiving position, and people that might have been on the upswing in their lives, and suddenly you're derailed because there is no support system, because it can break you, not just emotionally but financially sometimes, to be a caregiver. And I wholeheartly agree with you. Voting is so important because we have to get people that represent us and that see that this is an epidemic. Like, this is something that is not going away. It's almost to normal. What's helped me is normalizing it. It might happen to me, and that's why my wife and I have these decisions, or these discussions about future decisions, because I basically say 50% chance I'm gonna also get a diagnosis at some point. So let's talk about it now, and let's start looking at. And so to start supporting people that are trying to put programs in place and trying to get the right kind of support system for people who, like you said, don't have means. Here's a question, because this is something that not myself or my wife, but one of our best friends, her husband was diagnosed with early onset, and his family that he wasn't even really in contact with that much. Once he got his diagnosis and his wife started, it became the primary caregiver and started making decisions. They villainized her based on some of the decisions that she made, and it drove a rift not only between her and her husband's brothers and other family members, but also between her husband, who is now in this decline, created a rift between him and his brothers, his immediate family, because he's first of all going through the worst thing he could ever go through as he's aging. But now his relationship with his own two siblings is, because he was supporting his wife. She's my caregiver. She's been with me for 40 years. This is the person that knows me better than you guys do. I know I love you guys and you love me, but so did you guys experience anything like that in your situation? I'm sure you're nodding, maybe.
I did. My wife was very close with her youngest brother and her oldest brother, and her parents were still alive when she was diagnosed, so they were in their 80s. And when I explained to them the diagnosis, the brother who was the closest just couldn't take it and didn't like the decisions that we had to make as a family about her care. And so for a while, and unfortunately, for him, he didn't come to see her, you know.
Uh,
And so it was really hard to deal with having to take care of her, make these decisions about her care, take care of the children that we had together that were going to college, and also explaining to her aging parents why she couldn't, she was not going to be the family lawyer anymore, that she wasn't the person they could lean on. And it did drive a rift between, for a while, the family. The older brother understood right away, did research, and was just amazing, he and his wife. But it was painful. It was painful because I know how much they loved each other, and they love each other, the younger brother. And it was almost a point, by the time he came around, she was no longer verbal and would not recognize him when he came there.
wow.
Yeah, it can. It is very difficult. And friends, people who are really, really close, like sisters.
Right.
There were a few that we lost along the way because they just couldn't see, some because they just couldn't see the progression. And so it's really hard. I do want to just really quick, and if I can add on, everyone's been really amazing about the resources. When I walked out of the doctor's office, Emma, it was the same way. He said, she has early onset. There's nothing we can do. Good luck.
Good
Literally,
luck.
good luck.
Right.
And
Keep
here I
blueberry.
am,
Right.
expecting, as a legislator, expecting, where's the medicine? Where's this? And it was really that. And so one of the things that we tried to do in addition, we kept it, we did not make it public because, one, I was running for elective office, and two, once I got in there, I had this attitude like, you know what? It's none of their business. You know, I'm going to do it myself, which was wrong. As soon as we went public, which because we had to because a reporter was about to expose the whole thing.
We've been there too, so yeah, I know.
So exactly, but what it did was it liberated us as a family. As a family, we decided
Right.
we were going to release it on our terms. We got a reporter that we knew and trusted to do a story, but it helped us actually advocate, me in my position, advocate more for funding at the state and local level to have our healthcare system provide other people who didn't have access like I did. So it's really, really important. And we work with, the Alzheimer's Association, Us Against Alzheimer's, but we could do all that because we went public and we started holding candidates,
Accountable.
They did
Yeah.
not talk about healthcare, especially mental health, all of those things, then they weren't the people we supported. And
Right.
so I think that
Very
this brought up some important
That's
points.
great. Yeah. So we have about 3 minutes left. So if you guys each want to say something to kind of let your thoughts be known based on what we maybe were just talking about. I think Sandra, you have something you want to say. It looks like.
Yeah, no, I wanted to build on what's being said about change at the state, local or federal level. So my husband and I met on the Obama 08 campaign. We worked in the Obama White House together. And I was just back at the White House 2 weeks ago talking about federal policies. And I will say one thing that makes me very hopeful is that CMS does have a new program that is years of efforts by many, many different Alzheimer's groups to have Medicare pay for care coordination, to pay for respite care for caregivers. And it's really revolutionary and it's so exciting. And it makes me feel good. It makes me feel good that good things are coming and they never come fast enough.
Right.
But I want to share that hope with you all.
Thank you so much. Emma, Amy, any last words of advice, Emma?
I would just say, as you embark on this journey, I just want you to know that it's going to be okay. You're going to be okay. I know I'm crying and it looks like
That's
I'm
right.
not okay, but it is going to be okay. Please reach out. Please find support. As hard and there's so much grief and sadness attached to it, there is another side to this that's very uplifting and positive and beautiful. And I just want you to know at some point it will shift and you will start to see that.
Thank you so much for that. Amy?
I think for me, I think really supporting what everybody has said, which is that I can't say you're not alone because of course you are alone, but you are not only alone, right? You
Right.
also have resources, you also have support. I think people often do come around, and in the middle of that journey, there are some really terrible lows and terrible losses. And the other thing that I would encourage people to do is not only to talk about it, but to keep learning from it, So
Absolutely.
how you learn to take care of yourself, how you learn to take care of other people, but not until you've put your mask on first, and also just recognizing, that these are enormous and rolling problems. They are growing problems. And so I think for all of us, anytime you have a chance to get involved with an organization, anytime you have a chance to take help, don't be an idiot, take it. Anytime you have a chance to give help, be generous, give help. And those are the things you get to learn through this very big journey.
That was amazing. Thank you. We will end on that great ending. Thank you to my panelists for being here. Amy, Emma, Sandra, Rushern, your words of wisdom have been just amazing. Thank you to our audience for being here with us. Please, at the end of this, jump back into the CareCon lobby for some more incredible information. And we'll see all you guys later.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Great job, everyone. Thank you.
Thank
Okay.
you.